What's up, everyone? Kevin Allen here, aka the Geek from DFS Army, and NFL Week 8 is just about in the books. It is Monday, and every Monday, what I like to do is go back, look at the content we put together, look at my content, also look at the DFS Army content, the Domination Station Optimizer, what it was spitting out, the core plays, the projections, and kind of see how we did. We're going to check our cash lineup. We're going to see what cash did this week and what it took to win your cash games. And of course, our Milly Maker review, where we're not only going to try to, take a look at the Milly Maker winning lineup, but we're also going to try to replicate it using the Domination Station Optimizer and see if we can hit it. It is going to be challenging, but let's get right into it. And I'm going to start in cash games this week. As you can see right here on the left is my cash lineup for the week, which scored a 163.14. And that was good for about a 45% win rate, which was a slight loss on the contest. Not huge, but a slight negative on the contest. And of course, big regrets. Once again, like I feel like every week I say this, but the Domination Station, like our top optimal was actually significantly better and it would have smashed. I'll show you that in a second. But I'll show you where I came up with it and kind of what went wrong with the Milly Maker lineup. And I made two lineups. One was my sort of primary single entry, and one was the Milly Maker. The single entry really crushed, even with Ellinger as the quarterback. And I'm going to talk a little bit about him going forward and why I still think he was a very, very good play at the price. So the single entry crushed, and of course the the cash lineup, not great. So I'm going to call this one and taking an L on it, even though it returned, like I said, about 45% of the entry fees. In the win rate, I think I put in about 200 or 175 in this one. I always try to make 50 in this $5 contest, but they don't get picked up. So I got about 40 of them picked up. It's about 200. So let's call it about 75, 80% of the money back. The win rate's a little higher, but obviously you pay a rake on those entries to lower the dollar amount. So where did I come up with this lineup? Sam Ellinger, again, thought he was the easy play on the slate, a quarterback that runs for 4K. He came really close to throwing a touchdown pass, which would have smashed his 3x probability anyway. And there was a second pass that was sort of pass to fear that could have gotten him up over 16 or 17 fantasy points. So, a couple of bad breaks for Ellinger, but it would not surprise me if this guy comes back next week and puts up the 22 that we were all hoping for this week. That would have essentially taken down tournaments had it happened. And I stand by that call. So the interesting change I made, Josh Jacobs was a disaster. And in fairness, what really bothers me about the Jacobs play was I really was much higher on Foreman this week and some other, like Kamara and some other spots. And of course, the flip side for me was I was much higher on Tyreek Hill than pretty much anyone else. So in order to get Jacobs in there, I had to go down to Amon-Ra from Tyreek Hill, and that kind of affected the salary a little bit. But overall, not a bad one. Again, one of the cool things about doing head-to-heads is even when you miss the cut line, and again, the cut line this week was 176.5 for your double ups and your 50-50s or your double ups. So even if you miss it, you don't lose all your money, which is nice. And that allows you to keep playing every single week, and you'll have your weeks where you win more and you lose more, but you rarely lose everything, especially if you're following sharp approaches. I want to show you next my entries in the flea, which is the mass multi-entry contest that I like to enter each week. I do a little bit in the $3 one as well, but I tend not to max out the Milly Maker. So I like the flea. It's a nice little contest, and you could kind of prove your worth in it. Here, and I'll show you my entries, and this week was pretty good. I ended up with an 11th place finish and a 74th place finish in the flea. Obviously, you want that first place takedown, but if you take a look here, I unchecked Tyler Conklin, and you could not win without Conklin. I'm going to show you the optimizer and how I'm going to actually show you my optimizer settings that I use to get this distribution. And then we're going to take a look at the Milly Maker, which was an even higher winner. So here in the flea, The winner was Grey Poupon, who was all over the Conklin-Wilson combo in wide receiver, tight end. And, man, God bless you, bro. We were all over Wilson for sure. The Dom Station forced Wilson. You'll see they forced Wilson in every lineup. He was the pop. He was the Deezus take the wheel play of the week, pretty much. But what really impressed me is using Conklin. Like, what? Why would you do that? 0.9% owned. Conklin was the nuts tight end, and you needed him to take down the tournament this week, and really did not stand out as a good play at all. So, that one is pretty wild. Even when I allowed Conklin, who I had unchecked, I did eventually get it, but it only put him in 2 or 3 lineups for me. You'll see. So I'll show you how that worked out. But this was not the Milly Maker. This is the flea. If we actually take a look at the Milly Maker, All-Star Harry, he came through with a massive 272.68. And again, the big difference here between him and Grey Poupon was simply shifting over to Saints defense from Texans defense. So let's take a look and analyze this Milly Maker winning lineup and see what he did. There's nothing crazy here. It's actually pretty chalky outside of the Tyler Conklin play and, of course, Saints defense. So he's got 2 spots here that are super low owned. But you know what we talked about all week? If you watched any of my videos last week, we said Tua with 2 of, right? Tua with 2 of his pass catchers. That was the play this week. If you look at my notes as well, here's my cheat sheet for the week. Of course, we had Tua as a top play, 5-star. Tua gets the unicorn matchup at as Lions home games just tend to shoot out. Lions have been the defense to target, with opposing offenses allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing QBs. This is a game environment to look to build around. Tua is targeting one of Hill or Waddle with 60% of his targets. That's single or double stacks are in play. And of course, double stacks were the best play. And I talked about it in a lot of the shows this week. Because 30% of the targets go to Hill and close to 30% go to Waddle, you can double stack Tua for all the monies because the offense is super concentrated. Of course, we had Gesicki as the 3rd piece of those stacks. And actually, if you take a look at my notes for the week, it was pretty much either Tua, Hurts, or Ellinger. I didn't really do much else. Daniel Jones, I played a little bit of just for GPP contrarianism, a little bit of Dalton just to get silly with it, a little bit of Kirk Cousins, who actually did pretty well, and a little bit of Kyler Murray, who had a pretty decent game as well. So we were pretty on target with the quarterbacks of the week, obviously, except for Ellinger, who didn't work out. But what are you going to do? That's how it goes. We knew that going in. I would do it again, exactly the same, by the way, because that kind of play is always something you want to target in DFS. So kind of going through some of the notes that I put together, my cheat sheet for the week. Of course, we had Derrick Henry as a 4-star, Barkley, Kamara was a 4-star play. All of those did pretty well. Kamara and Henry were the nuts. Josh Jacobs was a big miss. Man, it was a miss. I didn't like him as much on FanDuel, but I did like him on DraftKings at $7,500 for the price. But obviously, when your team scores nothing, that's never good. Another one was interesting for me this week. A lot of people were all over Kenny Walker. I did not love him as much, I guess, as the field. But who we did like was Tony Pollard. Was a core play in all formats play core. I actually had 100% Pollard in my lineups. And Dante Foreman, I'm not sure why that's not showing up right, but Dante Foreman was another play that I had marked all and was a play that I loved. It only came about on Saturday when we found out Chuba Hubbard was out for the week. At the wide receiver position, obviously, Tyreek Hill was the top play on the slate for us. And, here in the notes, we gave you the warning off of these other wide receivers. And you see here the 3 and 2 stars for Kupp and Jefferson. All of these guys failed. So we were on the right names up top. Amon-Ra was a bit of a disappointment. Had an okay game, but didn't quite do enough. Waddle was somebody that I had set up just to stack with Tua rather than as a standalone play. And a couple other notes. Olave, pretty big miss this week. I would play him again, though. And my other all play was DJ Moore. So Olave was a pretty big miss. But I would do it again. He's been great. The only reason he missed was really, Kamara did all the work, and the game just became non-competitive. They didn't really need to throw much. tight end position was really rough this week without anybody really standing out. And my favorite defense was Commanders that did just fine. So just real quick, I want to show you first my distribution, like what I did on the Dom station, because a lot of you guys asked me what rules do I use week to week. Now, this week was a little bit unusual because of Ellinger, and I did not want to have a specific stack rule in place with him, but I knew I was going to play a lot of Ellinger lineups just because the 2K savings over the next cheapest guy or just about the next best guy is too much to ignore. And it's such an advantage for the player that all they need is a mediocre score to be in the nuts. So you had to load up on that scene. Plus a running quarterback, plus a guy who did well in the preseason. There were a lot of ingredients for a successful day, even though it didn't happen. Don't care about results, only care about process. But here you see, I stacked two with no less than two of his players. Cousins was also a stack with two for me. Hurts was a stack with one, running quarterback. And we wanted to avoid Hurts with Miles Sanders. So we got Hurts with exactly zero, same team. Kirk Cousins, same deal. You always avoid him and Dalvin Cook together. They do not have success together. Kyler Murray, I straight stacked with DeAndre Hopkins rather than worrying about stacking him with other players on his team. I just felt that was the best individual stack. And since I don't stack him with two, I figured all should be Hopkins. Similarly with Goff, I did all Amon-Ra. Again, didn't really work. And I also, for Goff exclusively, did a game stack because I love that game. That was the only game stack I really put in. Daniel Jones with no less than one did not work. Dalton with no less than two included the running back. So with him, it was always Kamara and Olave. Hey, listen, if Olave did anything, then maybe that could have worked. Fine. I also locked in any player that was tied to Sam Ehlinger. I locked them only with Ehlinger. This will not force Campbell or Pierce or Pittman into lineups, but what that does is it forces them to only be in Ehlinger lineups. I did that again on purpose because I figured Ehlinger's so cheap. If any of those wide receivers deliver a tournament winning performance, that Ehlinger would be the nuts play that week. So that just made sense to me. Hindsight, I probably could have just stacked Ehlinger, forced a stack with him as well. But I thought Ehlinger could do enough with his legs. And again, didn't need to do much. Just needed a 16 to an 18 to have a great shot of being the nuts play. So didn't happen. Devontae Adams with zero Jacobs, that didn't matter, but understand the reasoning behind it. I did that because, again, I could not see both of these studs putting up enough number to be in the nuts lineup together. PJ Walker, who I didn't end up using, locked with DJ Moore. And, of course, I avoided any Taylor with Ehlinger. So that was my approach for the week. Those are the rules I made. And you could see that when I ran it here, my top lineup is a 252.18. Again, let's take a look at the Milly Maker again. 252.18 was good for, a pretty high score here, but it was a better score in the flea, which is why I like the flea. You don't have to be as exacting. Got me 11th place in the flea, and looks like it was about a 25th or 30th place here, which would have been actually, it was a lot of money, but it would have been good for about $2,500. So at the very least, I probably would have made a little bit of a profit had I entered those lineups in the Milly Maker as opposed to the flea flicker. Now for the fun part. It's the part we like. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to load up the Dom station, the DFS Army Domination Station Optimizer, and I'm going to put it in incognito mode, and we're going to just first test the top optimals for the week. Let's see what they would have scored, and then we're going to see if we can replicate the Milly Maker winning score. Really important stuff. So obviously we have the benefit of hindsight now, but I'm going to show you what I do to create optimal lineups to attack cash games. And this gives you a guide. I don't necessarily recommend taking exact. I do like people to put their own twist on these, but we can sort of discover what the top optimal is and see what it would have been for this week. Now, I'm going to show you that this is not anything pre-rehearsed. So I'm going to reset settings. This is in incognito mode, so it gets rid of any sort of unique customizations that I made. All of the projections are back to our baseline projections where the optimizer closed off for the week. Now, one thing I always do with the optimizer is I don't allow tight end in the flex, so I'm just going to set that to 0. I definitely don't do that for cash lineups or unless it's a week where I want to load up on tight ends. which this is not. So I'm going to do that. And our backtest mode does not require, any sort of adjustment to run. It will just run naturally. We are in backtest mode here on the optimizer. So this is FanDuel. I've got the FanDuel one up first. And let's take a look at the top optimal. It's fucking awesome. A 187 score this week. The optimals, obviously the chalk really smashed. It's funny. This one has Jefferson and Damian Pierce in the lineup. And man, if you just flip in, a different running back and a cheaper wide receiver, this is like taking down tournaments on FanDuel this week. But 187, good for an easy sweep of all of your cash lineups, and pretty easy sweep of pretty easy cash in tournaments on FanDuel this week. So optimizer projection model, absolutely spot on. Let's take a look at what happens when we try this for DraftKings. And again, I'm just going to zero out tight end. I don't allow them in the flex in a cash or any lineup really, but definitely not a cash lineup. So we have the ability to zero that out. And we're going to just, actually, let me make sure we reset settings so that you see that that is just whatever raw projection. So again, I'll zero this out. For tight end, we'll run the top optimal here. And yeah, it looks like the top optimal that we get is, that was a little surprising actually. Oh, interesting. Really interesting one. But the top optimal here, 180.14, which was certainly good for the cash line. The cash line being 176.5. So a pretty easy cash here if you just basically took whatever the optimal gave you. Kenny Walker, interesting play there. It's what's really interesting to me is that the top, this one does not load up on running backs. The running back value was crazy good this week, but this was enough to get you there this week. So a big win for that. Now, the final thing that I like to do is see if we can really quickly run the domination station optimizer and recreate the tournament winning lineup without too many adjustments. Now, this is going to be a lot because Tyler Conklin, I don't even know if we're going to get there. And we're going to have to see. But I do know who was big, and I do know the players that I was big on this week. But what I'll do is I'll go back to my version of the optimizer, the one where I put in my own adjustments. And I want to show you the adjustments that I made this week. And I talked about this a little bit on the Players Club and on a few different videos I did this week, guys. So, and again, if you like this type of content, remember, like and smash the like button if you enjoy. This is strategy stuff. You don't really see too much of this on YouTube. So I really want to take you in the world of how I create my lineups and how I approach DFS in general with these videos. So again, if you like what I'm doing, let me know. Hit a comment, say, Kev, yeah, I like this approach. I like what you're doing. I like to see what you're up to. Or if you don't like it, still hit like or don't fucking watch. I don't care. So anyway, I like to bring you in though and show you what I do. So one of the things I talk about, the way that I set up the optimizer is I go position by position. I sort by fantasy points per dollar, and I make sure that the players that I love for the week are showing up as the top values on the slate on a fantasy points per dollar basis. So I'll go position by position and I'll sort by fantasy. And you could see who I like this week because they're right here. So obviously I love Tony Pollard. Derrick Henry, I raised his projection up. He was my favorite play on the slate. Donta Foreman, loved him. Loaded up on him. Alvin Kamara. These are the names on my cheat sheet for the week. This should always look exactly like the cheat sheet that I put out for you guys. And when you see more stars like a Tyreek Hill 5, the higher the stars, the more I like the player. So we're going to load up on these guys, either marked all or with high amounts of stars. And some of these guys, if I don't like them as much and they're just popping like crazy, I might give them a down vote. So, we had Pollard. And again, I don't know why it's not showing. I'm going to refresh that. I don't know why it's not showing the Foreman rating that I put in. But yeah, we like Foreman. And so you could see which players are going to show up the most. I went 100% Pollard in my MME this week. I had a ton of Foreman. I had max limits set on Donta Foreman, Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry, 36, 36, and 39. I only put max limits on players that are showing up to the max limit. So those were the limits I set on those guys. Again, at QB, you'll see what I did this week. I actually was messing with this before, but I had 25% Tua, and I pretty much went 40% Ellinger, and then just allowed a little bit of these other players in my lineup. So I'm going to just rerun this the way it is. And one thing I did change here before the show was I had unchecked Tyler Conklin, last week because I had no interest in playing him, and he was the nuts. So I checked him back in without giving him a like, but I am going to have to smash and adore. And this is the cheat code, right? I was not doing this week. There's two things we're going to have to cheat. Number one is I have to smash and adore on Tyler Conklin if I want him to show up in lineups at all, because he won't. The other thing is on defense, again, I had no Saints. This was not a team that I was playing this week. Although looking at it, it's not like their projection was that horrible. But if we want to get any Saints defense, we are going to have to raise their projection up a little bit. I don't know if I'll even get them. Let's see where the Commanders are. Yeah, I raised them up quite a bit. So I'm just going to raise them a little bit more to, let's say, 7.7. So basically, I just want to try and see if we can get any sort of Saints defense exposure. Actually, I'll go to 8.2, right? Something where, there they are. Okay, so now they're showing up all the way up here. Again, when you sort by fantasy points per dollar, this tells you which players you're going to have the most exposure to in the optimizer. So this is the best way to use the optimizer, by sorting by fantasy points per dollar for all of these spots. So I'm just going to give this thing a run. We are in, am I in backtest mode? Yes, we're in backtest mode. So I'm just going to give this thing a run, and we're just going to see what happens. I made 170, so I'm basically running it the same way I did, but all I did, I forgot to set, the rules are still in place. That's right. So the only change I made just now was what you just saw on screen. I basically smashed a love or an adore on, there it is. Well, there's your Milly Maker winning lineup right there. So there it is. I smashed an adore on Tyler Conklin to get some exposure to him. I had none. So freely admitting I had no exposure to this guy. But just smashing an adore on him, that's pretty much all it took, right? The first lineup generated a 276.98. Oh, this is killing me right now. Oh, damn you, Tyler Conklin. You cost me so much money. So just that one move, that got us to 270. Wait a minute, what do we get? Hold up. We got a 276, good enough to pass the Milly Maker's winner's score and take it down ourselves. All it took was a little love for Tyler Conklin. Let's see how much Tyler Conklin I wound up getting with this. So 14% exposure. So that's essentially not that much. Definitely more than I had or would have had, but not that much. Let's take a look at the overall exposures. Yeah, we got a lot of Hill. We got a lot of Waddle. Got a lot of Moore. Garrett Wilson was popping like crazy on the Dom. Here I had set a max limit of Olave. I don't remember why I did that, but I would not have done that actually in a main slate. So let me actually raise this up to a more realistic number. But for the most part, yeah, these are the players I used this week. Let's see what the running back situation did. Yeah, I had 100% Tony Pollard. That's really all it took. Smash a love on Conklin. Who knew? A lot of the chalk hit this week. The total percent owned on the nuts lineup here, 132%. That's relevant. I'm just going to look at some of these high scoring lineups and see what ownerships were. But yeah, pretty high. So I get a lot of questions about ownerships and where to set the ownership cap most weeks. Most of the time, we want to go very, very low, about 100% ownership. The only reason, actually, this week, when I ran it at 140. So yeah, there it is. It's 140. This was the setting that I used this week. So it's still live to my settings. And you guys asked me this during the week, and I obviously share everything with my DFS Army subscribers. But the reason I raised it up from my usual 110 to 140 was simply because Tony Pollard was so chalk, and I loved Donta Foreman as well. He was one of the chalkiest guys. He was on the chalkboard, by the way. I don't have the chalkboard loaded up here, but he was up there on the chalkboard as one of the highest owned guys. So between that, Foreman, Mostert, just the running back situation was so chalky this week. And of course, some of the Hill and Waddle plays were very chalky, but it was primarily the running back situation was so chalky that I knew I had to raise it up because I really wanted to go. I embraced the chalk in this run. So again, in going 100% Pollard, I made the decision to embrace the chalk. If you watch the Tournament Tactics show this week, we talked about Pollard and we said, listen, you're going to go two ways as a player. I said, Pollard should not fail. It's in the perfect spot. Unicorn should not fail. It's the perfect situation. But he's going to be 40% owned. Let's actually see what Pollard was owned in the Milly Maker. I'm curious. 50% owned. So there you go. So you have a player that's going to be 50% owned in a giant tournament. You make a decision, right? And people are going to say you're a donkey for playing Pollard, right? They're going to tell you, oh, you're stupid. You played Pollard. You played chalk. And again, if you watch my ownership leverage video, leveraging ownership, which is right here on the DFS Army YouTube channel as well, you'll see that, more often than not, even when you're definitely in a winning situation, it's better to fade the chalk in a giant tournament like this. But players are chalk for a reason. And Tony Pollard was as close to a can't fail as I've ever seen in DFS. So for that reason, I said, fuck it. I'm embracing it this week. But embracing it doesn't mean hitting 50%. For me, it was going 100%. That's how you beat the chalk. You just go 100% so that every single lineup that you have has it. And therefore, you're kind of beating the chalk that way. That's about the only way you can beat it. Wow, look at what All-Star Henry did here. That's a really interesting lineup. So the change that got him to 272 was DJ Moore in the flex, basically, and Saints defense. It was DJ Moore and Saints defense. I don't even think so. The nuts lineup that I produced has Kamara in the flex, does not even have DJ Moore. So there was a better version with Tua, Hill, Waddle, Wilson, Conklin than just the chalk trio of running backs that we used. And even if this lineup, the funny thing is, even if this lineup didn't have Texans, it had Commanders instead, it still puts up a 267, good enough to win the flea. And so this is a more likely lineup that I would have produced this week had I had, again, Tyler Conklin in my player pool, which again, I did not, which is why I didn't get here. So this is why I only finished 11th place in the flea, because I did not have, just the swap would have gotten me right up into that spot. It's just swapping Gesicki out for, it would just be swapping Gesicki out. And then, of course, I used Cowboys. This was a pay up. So this was one of the random pay up lineups, but just essentially Gesicki down to Conklin makes all the difference in the world. But that would have gotten me, let's see, is that the 268.98 lineup that this guy used? It's not exactly the same, but 267.98. So it would have been good for second place in the flea. There it is. He hit it as well. It would have been good for a second place tie. Hey, fucking split 20 grand. Fine by me. So close. Anyway, all right, that's going to do it for the Milly Maker review. We've got a lot coming up here on the DFS Army channel. We're going with the Showdown Breakdown tonight. Going to do it a little earlier at 4:15 Eastern time. We've got a great game for Monday Night Football. And, of course, beyond that, we'll have our DraftKings and FanDuel first looks and the game plan, all the good stuff. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know how you did this week in the comments section below. I'll see you guys next time.